Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is to take a stack of your sources and, well, dig into them, really extract the key insights and connect the dots so you can walk away feeling, well-informed.
And today, we're diving into a really powerful essay. It revisits a pivotal moment in history, but through a pretty surprising lens.
Right, that moment being the legendary 1965 debate at the Cambridge Union, James Baldwin versus William F. Buckley Jr.
Exactly. And the motion they tackled was incredibly direct. The American dream is at the expense of the American Negro.
So this essay we're looking at takes that debate, that specific motion, and asks, okay, what if we re-examine it now? The language from 65 is, well, obviously dated.
Sure, yeah.
But the core question the essay argues is still profoundly relevant. The central idea is that the structure of Baldwin's argument, his indictment, it still holds if you swap out American Negro for other marginalized groups.
But specifically, the focus here is on autistic person.
Right. And the essay is really clear. This isn't meant as, like, a simple metaphor.
No, not at all. The argument is that the American dream is structurally actually at the expense of the autistic person. Baldwin's critique, of this nation built on exploitation, on containment, on erasure, it resonates because the system didn't vanish.
It just is
adapted.
Yeah.
It diversified its targets. So the source suggests, think of the plantation becoming the institution, the whip becoming the behavior chart, the overseer becoming the diagnostician. It's mapping those functions onto modern contexts.
Okay, so our deep dive today is really about unpacking these key insights from this really remarkable rereading you've shared. We want to understand how this essay builds that compelling case, how Baldwin's critique of a nation that seems to have no place for certain people, how that speaks directly to the experiences of autistic people today based on this source.
Okay, yeah. Let's get into that core idea then. The essay really highlights Baldwin's starting point in the debate, his observation. It depends on what your system of reality is.
Which is just such a crucial place to begin. The source really underlines that Baldwin wasn't just giving his opinion there.
Yeah.
He was talking about paradigm, like what gets to count as real, what's moral, what's rational, what's, civilized. He's saying that's not some objective thing floating out there.
It's determined by power.
Right.
Who holds the power gets to name their perception, their reality, as the truth.
Yeah.
The universal truth.
Exactly. And what's fascinating, as the essay points out, is how this system of reality, which claims to be universal, is actually really narrow. It's partial, maybe even, fabricated.
And it's held up less by truth and more by just repetition, force. And the essay notes, when this system bumps up against someone living or perceiving outside its rules, maybe historically someone Black, queer, colonized, or now, thinking through this essay, neurodivergent.
It doesn't respond with curiosity.
No, it responds with hostility. It just cannot tolerate that contradiction. So the response is always to pathologize the perceiver, to say, you're the one who's wrong, not my system that can't make sense of you.
And this essay connects that directly, powerfully to autistic experiences. Our perception, our different ways of taking in the world, they get labeled as suspect. Our language, if it doesn't fit the mold, gets called delay. Our pain might be doubted unless someone neurotypical validates it.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
Difference gets framed as dangerous. And clarity, especially if it's clarity about how the system isn't working, well, that's just disruptive.
Right. The system wasn't built for us, is the core argument here. So instead of changing itself, it demands we change. Reshape ourselves until we fit, until we stop challenging its version of reality.
That connects so strongly to what Baldwin said, that famous line about the shock, of discovering the flag hasn't pledged allegiance to you.
Yes, and the source really highlights how many autistic kids have that same kind of shock.
Yeah.
Maybe your hand gets slapped away for stimming.
Or you're told, sit still, be quiet.
Exactly. Or your silence is just read as incompetence. Or maybe someone tells you gently, you're not quite ready for the mainstream classroom.
You need to work harder. Smile more?
Speak less honestly about what's really going on inside. It's that moment, right? The rules you thought were universal suddenly have an asterisk next to your name.
It's a really jarring thing to realize. And then the essay brings in what it calls the gut punch from Baldwin. That you can grow up, you can even achieve success by the system's own rules, and still, nothing you've done can actually save your own children from facing that same disaster, as he put it.
And what's really insightful, I think, is how the essay frames this. It's not just individual struggles repeating. It's presented as a function of a system that is designed to perpetuate itself.
How so?
Well, the source points to things like schools reproducing that diagnostic gaze. Parents, even loving parents are often taught by this system to see autistic traits primarily as deficits.
Right. The focus is on fixing.
Exactly. Professionals write reports that kind of flatten this incredibly complex human experience into, well, pathology checklists.
And autistic adults, if they speak up, challenge this.
Often silenced. Their hard-won wisdom is dismissed by the very systems that probably misunderstood them when they were kids.
So the intergenerational piece isn't just about trauma being passed down to us. The essay suggests it's also about what the system taught us to do to ourselves.
Yeah, like learning to mask, suppress who we are, because that's what got praised.
You got rewarded for disappearing, basically, for seeming normal.
In the dominant system, it demands that compliance, definitely. But maybe even more crucially, it demands that you forget the cost of it all. It wants you to buy into its version of you, to believe that's more accurate than your own experience.
But the essay ends this section saying, once that illusion cracks, once you see the system,
you can't unsee it.
Right. And the source argues more and more autistic people are hitting that point, that moment of clear-sighted perception.
We're not confused or broken, the essay says. We are perceiving accurately. And that perception is the actual threat to a system built on, well, a manufactured reality.
Okay, that feels like a really good point to pivot to the essay's discussion of labor.
Yes. Baldwin's statement there is just immense. I picked the cotton, I carried it to market, I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing.
It's so powerful because it's not just stating facts, right? He's reclaiming authorship. He's saying the American dream wasn't just wished into existence.
No, it was built, scaffolded, as stolen time, stolen bodies, stolen futures.
And the source draws this direct parallel. It argues autistic people also perform immense labor. But it's not, the kind you find on a spreadsheet.
Right. It's described as the labor of containment, of translation, of survival. Just existing and navigating systems that fundamentally weren't designed to hold us or include us authentically.
Okay, let's dig into that. What does that labor actually look like, according to the essay?
Well, it's the constant effort of masking, hiding your natural self. It's trying to decode social rules that often feel completely illogical.
Anticipating how others might react just to stay safe.
Yeah, studying neurotypical behavior, almost like it's a foreign language you have to master because, as the essay puts it, your safety, maybe even your life, can depend on getting it right.
Performing emotional regulation when the environment offers you none.
Exactly. Deciphering all the complex social politics just so you don't get labeled as difficult or uncooperative. It's constant.
And the essay stresses this labor is constant, it's exhausting, and critically, it's for nothing.
Meaning it's not recognized as labor.
Right. It gets relabeled as progress or improving or being functional or learning to cope.
But the source argues that kind of coping, it costs everything. It just hollows you out.
Yeah. And what the essay points out as particularly insidious is that even when autistic people manage this performance, when they succeed by those external standards,
This often get used against others.
right, the whole, well, she can do it, why can't you narrative.
Exactly. Their exhaustion, the sheer effort involved, gets reframed as some kind of virtue. Their closeness to the norm becomes the only acceptable aspiration.
They become proof the system works, supposedly, while everyone else who can't or won't do that performance gets pushed aside.
So it's performance. It's not real inclusion. It's demanding you follow a script written by someone else for their comfort, really.
Yeah. But the essay doesn't just leave it there, does it? It also points to the building within the community.
Oh, absolutely. The incredible, vital work. Informal support, mutual aid, people creating shared toolkits and resources, online groups, collectives, just holding space for each other, speaking back.
Building the kind of access that the mainstream world isn't providing.
Because they know intimately what it feels like to be locked out.
And yet this foundational work, the essay notes, it's almost never paid, rarely even acknowledged.
Right. Autistic people are described as being the actual infrastructure of care for each other, yet the wider system still often frames them as burdens.
They're doing the labor behind buzzwords like neurodiversity awareness, but then they get erased by the very campaigns marketing it.
And the source is clear. This isn't some mistake or glitch in the American dream. It's framed as part of its maintenance protocol. Keep the unpaid labor flowing, keep the credit elsewhere.
Which maybe explains that point the essay makes about the debate happening in the UK.
Yeah, the significance of the location.
Yeah.
Baldwin saying, I built this country and it was never meant for me. That level of fundamental challenge to the system itself?
Was maybe too much for American halls of power then.
And maybe even now, the essay suggests, that truth needed perhaps the distance of the ocean to be heard without immediate, overwhelming defensiveness.
Like it needed witnesses who were maybe one step removed, who could hear the truth without feeling directly accused in that same moment.
Something like that.
Good.
So the conclusion this source draws is stark. The dream still demands its price. And today, autistic people are definitely among those getting the bill.
Okay, let's shift then to William F. Buckley Jr.'s role in that debate. The essay calls him the vice of, what was it? Institutional narcissism.
Yeah. And the argument isn't that Buckley was trying to genuinely engage with Baldwin or, win hearts and minds based on the truth.
No, his goal was different.
His goal, as the essay presents it, was to reassert dominion. To kind of remind everyone listening that the world Baldwin was describing, this world built on deep injustice, had to be kept beneath serious consideration. Not because it wasn't true,
but because acknowledging its truth threatened the very institutions Buckley was there to defend.
Precisely. And his method, the essay argues, is depressingly familiar. You take this huge collective indictment of a system,
and you shrink it down.
You dilute it, make it sound like just personal complaints, individual grievances. You reframe structural violence as just fortunate anecdotes.
Sidestep the moral questions by throwing out statistics or pointing to exceptions.
Exactly. And the essay says you hear that same song today in autistic contexts. It's the try harder, use your tools, sit still, make eye contact.
Right. Start focusing on what the system denies you. Focus on what it offers if you just work for it properly.
And remember Buckley bringing up income comparisons, pointing to so-called successful Black individuals as proof the system wasn't inherently broken.
Yeah.
The essay draws a direct line from that to how, today, people defending the status quo will often highlight autistic individuals who fit a certain mold. Maybe they're very verbal, seem productive, grateful, easily marketable.
And hold them up as proof the system can work while ignoring everyone else it fails. Buckley didn't really reject the idea of injustice, did he? He just relocated the blame onto the individual.
That's the argument, which leads us to that really striking concept, institutional narcissism.
Explain that a bit more.
It's this idea that the institution itself, much like a narcissistic individual, fundamentally cannot apologize for the harm it inflicts. It can only justify.
It can't dismantle the parts of itself that cause harm because its primary drive is self-preservation.
Exactly. And crucially, it can't truly see the people it harms. It only sees the threat they pose to its own image, its own narrative about itself.
And the essay uses Buckley's own words after the debate, him being proud because he did not give them one bleep inch.
Yeah, and the source frames that not just as competitive debate talk, but as a declaration of intent. My job here is to stonewall. It wasn't about persuasion or finding truth.
It was about dressing up elite contempt in respectable language, making inequality sound reasonable.
And making resistance sound impolite, unreasonable, disruptive.
And that legacy, the essay argues, is still very much with us. That kind of respectable reactionaryism, it didn't die out.
No, it flourished, paved the way for others who, monetized that kind of resentment, turning the clarity Baldwin offered into something to be feared and attacked.
The essay connects us to very concrete things happening now.
Yeah. Ideological descendants banning books by neurodivergent authors in schools. Slashing Medicaid waivers that people rely on for basic survival and support.
Proposing surveillance systems disguised as helpful intervention.
And just sneering at autistic ways of being as deviant as something that needs to be corrected or suppressed.
And the crucial point the essay makes is that from their point of view, they genuinely believe they're right. They believe they're winning.
Because they see the system as fundamentally neutral. Its harshness is justified, maybe for order, maybe for efficiency. Its defenders are the civilized ones.
And its victims. They just need to learn to ask nicely, speak the right language, be polite, and maybe then they'll be heard.
But Baldwin, as the source powerfully reminds us, just refused that entire premise. He refused the demand for politeness in the face of injustice.
And the call from this essay is for autistic people and their allies to refuse it too.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to that core motion then. The American dream is still at our expense. The essay revisits Baldwin's warning. Until we accept our history, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream.
Meaning that reckoning with the foundational harm, the exploitation, the erasure, it's essential. But the dream itself, as a concept, this source argues, is almost built to resist that kind of deep reckoning.
The essay suggests that Buckley's side didn't actually lose the structural fight back then. They just rebranded. repositioned.
They made sure the machinery of the state, the big institutions, kept running in ways that perpetuated inequality, but without having to really account for the human cost.
And that basic logic, that system, it endures. And autistic people, among others, are caught in its gears. They're counted among the casualties.
So the American dream, as it functions now, the source argues, still demands some form of erasure for entry.
Yeah. Inclusion is conditional. Potential is only valued if it fits a narrow definition of productivity.
And success is measured by behavioral compliance, not by actual human flourishing in all its diversity.
Which is why, according to this source, institutions still find it so hard to genuinely grapple with their own history, their eugenic roots, people like Kanner, Asperger, Lavasas.
These were key figures in defining autism, but their work was deeply tied into identifying and managing difference, weren't they?
Increasingly, yes, that's the understanding. And the essay argues that while the language has changed, we don't talk openly about eugenics in the same way the underlying logic hasn't entirely disappeared.
So things get repackaged.
Exactly. Things like ABA, which prioritize changing behavior to fit norms, get presented as compassionate care. Autism registries become safety measures. Surveillance technology becomes early detection.
And all the talk about progress and awareness, the essay seems skeptical.
It questions it, yeah. Especially when acceptance seems conditional on silence or on performing gratitude back to the system that might be offering minimal, often inadequate support.
So real progress, the essay insists, has to be rooted in something different. Relational justice.
Right, which means centering things like consent, real dignity, and co-creating care with autistic people, not just imposing it on them.
Otherwise, it's just expanding the same old medical industrial machine that always aimed for normalization, for invisibility.
Yeah, and the core point the source drives home is this. Until the nation truly accepts autistic people not as broken versions of normal, but as sovereign minds with different, valid ways of perceiving, meaning, making, expressing, the dream remains closed by design, not by accident.
The essay also touches briefly on the political side, impartially pointing out parallels.
Yes, noting that back in Baldwin's time, both major parties resisted deep civil rights reform until forced by massive pressure. And even then, protections were often weakened later. Neither party really wanted to grapple with Baldwin's deeper question. What if the system isn't broken, but working as intended?
And today, what parallels does the source draw?
It points out again impartially that autistic children are still sometimes institutionalized. Vital services through Medicaid are often rationed or underfunded. IDEA, the law meant to ensure education access, remains significantly underfunded.
Autistic adults can face criminalization for behaviors linked to sensory needs or the effects of poverty.
And administration after administration, the source notes, hasn't fundamentally dismantled the systems that allow these things to persist.
Why not? What's the essay's take on that?
It argues that Buckley's generation essentially succeeded in preserving the empire's architecture. They taught their successors how to talk about reform and awareness while keeping the actual structures of control intact.
They perfected respectability, deflection, not real accountability.
And they created a system where you can point to a few success stories, a few included individuals, and say, see, it works. It allows the system to avoid fundamental change.
But the dream still comes at a cost. It's just learned, as the essay puts it, to smile while sending the bill.
And Baldwin's warning echoes. There is scarcely any hope until we confront the full truth of how power works and who it consumes.
Wow. So what does it actually mean then, according to this essay, to belong to a country that seems like it defined itself against your existence?
It means your presence alone is a disruption. Your survival feels like an unintended side effect of systems built to contain you or convert you or just make you disappear.
You move through institutions, schools, workplaces, healthcare that feel like they were built assuming you weren't there or shouldn't be, calibrated for someone else.
Yeah. Inclusion feels less like belonging and more like a performance you have to put on.
Every accommodation feels like charity, not justice. Like you're only allowed in if you're quiet, compliant, grateful.
Or translated, yeah. Translated into terms the dominant culture finds acceptable.
You end up learning this whole second language, not French or Spanish, but the language of neurotypical social cues.
Eye contact, small talk, reading between the lines. It's this exhausting choreography the essay suggests of trying to belong without being allowed to truly be.
And all the while, your difference is being medicalized, pathologized.
Yeah. You're told you lack insight. You're too emotional, too literal, too intense, just too much.
But the essay argues Maybe your feelings are accurate. Maybe your insights are spot on, and that's why they're dangerous to the status quo, because you see the cracks.
Right. You see what isn't supposed to be seen.
And policies so often focus on kids, on early intervention, almost like prevention.
Rather than focusing on presence, on support for autistic adults to live full lives, the focus is on outcomes measured by closeness to normal, not autonomy or flourishing.
And your pain, your grief, it's like it doesn't count unless a neurotypical person validates it.
You have to explain your struggles in their language, fit it into their boxes, and even then you might get asked, well, did you try masking harder?
It feels like your existence is framed as a tragedy unless you overcome it.
And if you do manage to navigate the system successfully, by its rules, maybe through immense effort or privilege,
Then your story gets taken, used against others. See? It's possible. Why can't you manage?
even genuine resistance, the essay notes, can get co-opted. Neurodiversity becomes a corporate brand. Pride events become surface-level pageantry. Self-advocacy gets twisted into just asking permission politely.
But despite all that, you're still here. The essay ends that section on such a powerful note.
Yeah. You remain. You find each other in the gaps. You build kinship. You keep this echo alive. You belong, the essay says, not because the nation let you in.
But because you carry something else, a different memory, a longer rhythm.
You belong to the breath between the official sentences, to the stories they don't tell, to the future you're already building with every single refusal to disappear.
Which brings us right to the essay's conclusion, this call for refusal, for reclamation. It echoes Baldwin's final words in that debate so clearly. I am not an object of missionary charity. I am one of the people who built the country.
And the essay frames that as Baldwin just refusing. Refusing containment, refusing pity, refusing the empire's gaze disguised as help.
Reclaiming his dignity, his authorship. Recognizing the value created through stolen labor, through survival, through unacknowledged brilliance.
Exactly. And the essay argues autistic people must make a similar refusal. We refuse to be seen as just anomalies, as puzzles, as footnotes.
We are not, the source insists, the acceptable collateral damage of someone else's dream.
No. The declaration is, autistic people are builders. We build kinship. We build clarity. We build alternative futures based on care and understanding.
We're mapping care systems the state won't. We're finding patterns others miss. We're telling our own stories.
And, the source says, we are done apologizing for existing, for being different.
So this future the essay envisions, it's not just about getting a slightly better version of the old dream.
Not at all. It's a rejection of its fundamental terms. The essay is blunt. We are not interested in access to systems that only welcome us if we erase ourselves. We are not here for inclusion in empire.
So what are we here for, according to this?
We are here, the source argues, to write otherwise. Not just asking for equality within a broken system, but demanding to be seen, fundamentally, as real.
And in recognizing that reality, we start rewriting the dream itself.
Yes. And that rewriting, the essay powerfully concludes, it's for the ones who come next.
For the autistic kid who can stim freely and be met with joy or just acceptance.
For the non-speaking adult whose silence is respected, whose communication is supported. For the generation that maybe, just maybe, won't have to choose between being understood and being whole.
Baldwin made visible what the system tried to keep hidden.
Now, this essay argues it's autistic people's turn to continue that work, to make our reality visible.
The dream was built at autistic expense. The final line lands hard. Let it crumble. Something better is already being built.
Wow. We've really covered some ground today, diving deep into this essay and the connections it draws. Between Baldwin and 65, his indictment of systemic injustice, and these structural challenges the source highlights for autistic people today.
Yeah, how that dominant system defines reality, how it demands this huge amount of unpaid labor, how it resists accountability.
And hopefully, for you listening, seeing these historical echoes, these structural parallels laid out in the essay, maybe it sparks some aha moments about how exclusion works systemically and what belonging truly means, or what it feels like to be constantly told you don't.
Which does leave us with that final thought the essay pushes us towards, doesn't it? Something for you to mull over.
If the old dream, as this source really argues, relied on the idea that some people just had to disappear or be suppressed so others could thrive,
then what does building a truly new reality, one where all these diverse minds, these different ways of being, aren't just tolerated but are actually seen as foundational, as sources of strength? What does building that actually require from all of us?
Yeah. What does that look like for you in your life, your community, your sphere of influence?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.